looks as if the list of participants has increased dramatically, so we'll assume that the room has been opened and go ahead, get underway. First off, thank you and welcome to the session entitled the Hemp Legal Review, Updates, Advice, and Live Question and Answers with the Experts at this year's Pennsylvania Hemp Summit. As general housekeeping, we would ask that you please remain muted during this session. Each presenter will have time to present, and you may submit your questions through the chat feature at the bottom of the screen. Following all the presentations, EmmaRose and I will do our best to answer your questions, and I turn it over to her for her introduction now.
Good morning, everybody. I hope you can all still see me. I had just tried to share my screen, and although we all should be very familiar with the virtual platform by now, want to make sure everybody's good. My name is EmmaRose Boyle. I am an associate attorney with Barley, Snyder. We're a central Pennsylvania full-service law firm, and we do have a pretty significant food and agribusiness practice, part of which is the industrial hemp industry. So I will go ahead and let Bill give his interruption, and then we'll go ahead and jump right in.
Thanks. My name is Bill Rourke. I trust I come across far less scripted than I just did a moment ago. I'm a partner at the Southeastern law firm of Hamburg, Rubin, Mullen, Maxwell, and Lupin. I'm chair of the Pennsylvania Bar Association's Medical Marijuana and Hemp Law Committee, and also chair that practice group in my firm. So look forward to speaking with you.
So welcome everyone to the Hemp Legal Review, Updates, Advice, and Live Q&A with the Experts. I guess that's us, Bill. So presumably you're all here because you have some money and you want to see if you can make it grow. Pardon the pun, I promise this presentation is likely filled with them. I can't help myself even years into talking about this topic. And theoretically you believe in or are at least interested in the hemp market. Great, you're in the right session. So we'll start at the beginning, a real great place to start. I think I'm jumping ahead of myself here. So some basics. What does it mean to be an investor in today's hemp industry? Well, you can invest in hemp just like any other publicly traded industry now. For example, you can simply purchase shares in corporations like Canopy Growth or Aurora Cannabis. They're both Canadian publicly traded companies. By the way, nothing in this presentation is an endorsement of any particular company. Let's talk about how some of these big players got to where they are, which, spoiler alert, may not be where they want to be. Again, both of these companies are Canadian. Canada legalized industrial hemp in 1998, but 20 years later, there's still some challenges. Also subject to certain provincial and other restrictions, adult recreational use is legal in Canada. So Canada companies have been at this a bit longer than we have, and they do have a bit more of diversity in the industry to play with. However, public trading is still relatively new. Canopy Growth came onto the scene in Toronto in 2014 and then later onto the New York Stock Exchange in 2018. Aurora followed closely on the New York Stock Exchange in 2018. Both companies do have operations in about 24 nations, including the United States, and do have somewhat diversified industries. Both are also facing class action lawsuits from investors and shareholders. So filed in the United States District Court in New Jersey, the suit against Aurora did claim that the company significantly overpaid for certain assets. It failed in its business transformation and ultimately is facing some pretty major goodwill impairment. Might not be a good look if this doesn't turn out well for Aurora. This one was filed in October of this year, so we have yet to see where the claims that Aurora made materially false statements about its position actually go. However, Canopy Growth led Aurora in becoming involved in a lawsuit. It had been filed back in November of 2019 with a similar basic claim that its failures and lack of transparency with its investors made statements about its position false and misleading. What's interesting about the Canopy case is that some claims made are directly tied to the unique difficulties of actually growing high quality hemp. Plaintiff's Second Amendment complaint in the Canopy case specifically alleges that Canopy's efforts to grow a good bud quality hemp failed, resulting in low quality hemp that could only be processed into a supply of soft gels and gummies that weren't supported by market demand and couldn't be. Does that sound familiar? Again, this case is still in its early stages and Canopy has indicated its intention to vehemently defend its position. So what does all this tell us about litigation related to investing in publicly traded cannabis companies? That it's the same as investing in any other publicly traded company. Certainly there is risk, but the risk is primarily that the company you're investing in doesn't have a strong enough business model to provide a return on investment. Of course, the more an investor understands about the specifics of the hemp industry, the more likely that an investor will be able to make an informed choice about whether to invest. So maybe you have instead decided to invest in one of the smaller budding, see, I warned you about the puns, businesses, maybe based right here in Pennsylvania that you met at last year's summit or yesterday during the networking breaks. Great. But what are the risks there? This is a question I've addressed a ton of times when a client comes to me with a private placement memo and asks, can I invest my money in this guy my friend knows who grows hemp and is building this promising business model? The cheekiness that can only be gained by a 12 years of being taught by nuns in me wants to say, I don't know, can you? But that's not what I get paid for. So the lawyer in me tends to use a few more words. I start with just two though. The famous lawyer answer, it depends. First, it depends on what part of the industry or even industry adjacent sector you want to invest in. For example, there is seed or nursery stock supply and sale. There's growers, there's grower cooperatives forming, there's harvesting machinery, drying, processing machinery, transportation, packaging. You get the picture. I'm confident that by now, all of you, even after just attending the 2020 summit sessions that have come before us, you know that the opportunities are endless. Investing in smaller startup companies doesn't necessarily mean more transparency. For example, in July of 2020, the SEC itself brought a federal lawsuit in California alleging that 5 companies solicited over $12 million from about 220 investors for a growing farm in California. But not only does the complaint allege that the defendants misled investors regarding expected profits, it also alleges that the companies deceived investors on how money would be spent and even misappropriated investors' money. Another interesting facet of this suit is that certain of the defendants engaged in conduct not in compliance with the SEC, such as acting as brokers when the individuals were not registered as required. This means that investors lack certain information intended to protect them. Remember though, private placements don't always need to be registered, so they don't always have those requirements of the information intended to be provided to investors. Investing in a private placement may not only be risky, but it can also be nearly impossible to sell because of the lack of a market for them, or sometimes even onerous restrictions that an investor agrees to when purchasing. So it's really important to understand that when investing in private placement, there may not be an easy way to get out if things get skunk. So what if your investment buys you some amount of control? If you purchase equity, you probably have some measure of control. Does that mean you also have liability? Generally, under Pennsylvania law, a member in an LLC, for example, isn't personally liable for liabilities of the LLC. However, this doesn't shield a member from his or her own conduct. As it directly relates to growing hemp in Pennsylvania, a permit requires that an applicant for a permit that is a business must have all of its key participants listed on the permit and obtain background checks. Key participants are those having a direct or indirect financial interest and also includes executive officers in a corporation. So if you're going to be investing a significant amount and becoming a member in an LLC, or you are appointed as an investor based on the amount of money you invested to an executive level position, you are going to need a background.
And I'm sorry if I can just quickly chime in. Practically speaking, what that entails is often having to go to a police barracks and submitting to fingerprints and then sending them into a third-party corporation who will be sending them directly to the state. So it's more than simply filling out some forms online.
So what if you just make a loan to a startup? Just give them money and hope they pay it back. Maybe your engineer son-in-law, let's call him Mark, has developed a hydroponic growing system that can support the height of fiber varieties, and your daughter begs you for a cool $500,000 to finance the prototype. Promises to pay you back with interest when Elon Musk buys the technology from him. Great. You may feel like the fact that Mark's married to your daughter is security enough, but I would still not advise giving Mark an unsecured loan. Ignoring the tax consequences of just giving him a gift, it can be incredibly difficult, even if you would win a lawsuit to recover your money, to ever get paid. And lawsuits are expensive. Security must also be adequate. In our example, obtaining a security interest in Mark's accounts receivable isn't going to help if he never actually has any accounts receivable. So if he never makes any money, you can never get it back. So what are the chances that your investment does make money? Well, again, it depends. Obviously, at the beginning of the commercial growing under the 2018 Farm Bill, there was a lot of promise. The hemp industry had a boom and everybody thought they were going to get rich really quick because it was this brand new industry and everybody thought that there was a ton of money to be made. There certainly still is, but things are starting to level out a little bit. Again, it depends. As we wrap up this second commercial growing season, we're starting to get a little bit of clarity. Pennsylvania did grant 324 permits in 2019. There was no acreage cap. So theoretically, a successful grower can grow a lot of profitable acreage. On the other hand, it can also waste a lot of money planting non-profitable acreage. Hemp is not yet a publicly traded commodity like corn or soybeans. So there's no guaranteed readily available market for any of the products of hemp right now. As the industry does develop, we expect to see some of the bottlenecking, at least on the processing side, minimize. Some growers have had the benefit of obtaining a guaranteed price from processors if they do escape crop destruction, but some have not, many have not seen the cannabinoid analytics show expected levels to be profitable, even if compliant.
One other point, if I may, is an important distinction to make between Pennsylvania's hemp industry and perhaps some other similar industries, is that currently there is no limit on the number of permits that Pennsylvania's Department of Agriculture has available for hemp growers or processors. That has a direct impact on the supply and demand curve, because you may have and not may, I think in some instances you have seen an excess amount of supply because you don't have those competitive restraints that you may see in other markets, such as a medical marijuana market, where there is a limited number of permits available. Sorry, go ahead.
So we addressed quite a few different flavors of risk already. By now, we're all on the same page that business risks are inescapable, no matter what industry you're investing in. While some commentators are still calling hemp a can't lose industry, looking at you, Motley Fool, I will again say that the best way to manage risk is to understand it. So what are some of the risks of investing in a grower, the actual producer, the boots on the ground farmer of hemp? As we discussed, there are some opportunities for publicly traded stock, even if they may not be the best bet. Small and startup businesses may want to make your dollar go further for them, maybe even for you. Many of these small startups may be having difficulties with banking. As you've heard, some banks are all in on hemp, some still stay away. A company can get a small business administration loan for a compliant hemp business. Of particular relevance, the SBA made clear at the beginning of the year that a compliant hemp business could even avail itself of the economic injury disaster loans that were made available as part of the CARES Act, assuming they met the other criteria. In addition, so much of the cannabis industry in general, not just for hemp, relies on enforcement discretion exercised by the federal government. Based on the expected future political environment, this may become irrelevant. But the important thing about enforcement discretion in any area of the law is that it's not law. It can change at any time and it should never be relied on. So let's assume that you've decided to invest in a grower or processor. There are a few basic questions you should ask about the viability of the business. First, we need to talk about licensing. It's required for both farmers and processors in Pennsylvania now. For a farmer, the growing license is a term of 1 year. For processors, it is a little bit longer. It lasts for a term of 3 years. So there is a little bit more longer term confidence in investing in a processor, just because from year to year, the chance of their license not being renewed is a little bit less. The costs for licensing are trending downward. So we're saving a little bit of money on that. And the restrictions for growing operations are changing year to year. Granted, the restrictions are becoming less onerous in many cases, but depending on the types of seeds that may test hot, or Pennsylvania does have a list of suspect and prohibited varieties. So that list may change from year to year as well. In addition, for any growers that are also providing propagules or seeds to be resold, they also need separate licenses that aren't related to the hemp industry. Then we need to talk about what is your grower actually growing the crop for. There's a ton of different varieties of hemp, as you all know, and there's a ton of different uses for it, again, as you all know. So what variety they're growing depends on where their market can go and the strength of their market. So are they growing for fiber? Are they growing for seed? Are they growing for CBD and other cannabinoids? Some of those products may call into question a little bit of a riskier variety to be grown. For example, the CBD or cannabinoid varieties are going to be higher in all of the cannabinoids, so therefore have a little bit of a higher risk of testing hot. And then what do you do with that crop? So I think Bill can speak a little bit to how CBD can go into the market.
Thanks. And this is always a kind of a fascinating part of the discussion, because I'm going to ask all of you to try to fit a square peg into a round hole, and we're going to see how well that goes. First and foremost, under the law, the production and the sale of CBD-based medicine and products is illegal. Period, hard stop. Now, if you drove from your home to your office this morning, you very likely passed about half a dozen places that are selling CBD-based products and medicines. So how do we fit that square peg into a round hole? The analysis has to start with the Farm Bill. And although the Farm Bill removed hemp as it's defined in that law from the Controlled Substances Act, it also provided in there, and I am oversimplifying this, language that said, hey, you can't forget about the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act. And that this change to the Controlled Substances Act does not preempt any language that might be applicable that's found in the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act. And again, if there are any health law attorneys on this call or anyone who has experience in that industry, forgive me for the oversimplification, but I think it helps better understand it. The Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act has very detailed provisions in there that, boiled down to it, provide that if there is an active ingredient in an already FDA-approved drug or medicine, then it is unlawful for other companies to take that active ingredient and put it into some other product and sell it as their own medicine. So we have, perhaps all of you have heard of the GW pharmaceutical drug known as Epidiolex, which is an FDA-approved drug, the active ingredient of which is marijuana-derived CBD. I'll offer you this analogy. It's one that I've used in the past, and hopefully it helps kind of put this together. I have in the other room a jar of blood pressure medicine. And on the other side of my fence outside is my neighbor, Dan, who's a bright guy and leads up a team of scientists at Merck. Let's say I were to take my bottle of blood pressure medicine and give it to Dan and say, Dan, I would like for you to take the active ingredient out of this blood pressure medicine and come back and give it to me. Dan takes it to his lab, he does that, and he gives me a vial and he says, Bill, this is the magic stuff that makes your blood pressure medicine work. I say, excellent. I then come into my kitchen and I pour that vial into all these jars of orange juice. And then I go out onto the street and I start selling Bill's Magic Orange Juice, guaranteed to reduce your blood pressure. You all would think I was crazy and should be locked up because I'm selling snake oil. To a certain extent, that is exactly what's happening in the CBD market. Companies have taken the active ingredient of an FDA-approved drug, CBD, and they are out there putting it into other products, oils, creams, tinctures, I represent a company that's putting it into equine products. And as a result, they are violating the Food, Drug, Cosmetic Act. Now, the reason that these two can exist is simply put, the line of legality and the line of enforcement have been drawn in two different places. We've all seen teams of enforcement agents with jackets that say FBI and DEA on it, but how often do you see the FDA coming in with their fancy jackets and guns drawn? Instead, what you can see is with a few Google strokes, you can go to the FDA's homepage and you can see how they seek to enforce these violations. And what they do is they send enforcement letters. And I think the most recent one was just sent a few months ago, and the FDA updates it periodically. And if you pull those enforcement letters, all public record, they will specifically tell you what I just relayed, that, hey, company, we see your website, we see that you're advertising CBD-based products, that violates the Food, Drug, Cosmetic Act, knock it off. Now, if you scroll far enough back into the history of companies that have received those CBD letters, you will see that Charlotte's Web has received more than their fair share of letters. You can then go to Charlotte's Web website and see how much of an impact that has had on their business. So where producers in this line of work have to operate is in this finely kind of defined gray area that's constantly changing, right? We don't necessarily know what, well, let me phrase that another way. We know what you're not allowed to say. We can pull up all the engagement letters and say, or all the enforcement letters and say, look, these are examples of advertising language or production approaches that if you undertake, you'll get yelled at by the FDA. So you try to avoid those, and you as investors, as part of your due diligence, would not only be asking, what are they doing with their end product, but how are they advertising that end product? Are they treating it like a medicine, a dietary supplement? And then, what efforts are they going to take to make sure that they comply with all of the other federal laws that, even though the Farm Bill said, yes, you can grow hemp, all these other laws said, but you still got to be a little careful with what you do with it. So back to you, EmmaRose.
Another important fine point to put on the food issue is that not all parts of the hemp plant are illegal to eat. It is not illegal to sell hemp hearts, hemp seed oil as food products. I'm sure you've seen them in the health food stores, probably long before the 2018 Farm Bill. That is because they have been the subject of a GRAS application. GRAS means generally recognized as safe. They do not actually contain a significant amount of cannabinoids. So the fine distinction between the hemp seeds and the CBD or cannabinoids that Bill was talking about is, Bill is talking about the actual CBD itself, not the plant or hemp as an entire plant. So those seeds, perfectly fine to eat, perfectly fine to include in food. So the hemp teas, the beers that you've seen that are brewed with hemp seeds or hemp hearts, all those things, they're not against the law. So you can't automatically look at an investment opportunity and say, oh, we're putting hemp in food for humans or animals, can't have it. That's not quite accurate. So there's always a little bit of an extra step, a little bit more of a dive in you want to take just to see if it's a non-starter from the beginning or a little bit more risky from the beginning, or if it's perfectly fine. Bill and I, just before you all joined us, talked about how it's really interesting that about 80% of the imports into the United States of the hemp plant is actually hemp seeds. Part of that because we obviously need seeds to grow more hemp, but another part of it is because those seeds are the product which are available for commercial sale as a food product.
To put some numbers to that, I found that article again. As of, and these are numbers from 2019, the United States has imported over $65 million in hemp-based products. Perhaps not surprisingly, 90% of that came from our neighbors to the north in Canada. But of that 65 million, close to 50 million of it was importation of seeds. So that really is the focus here.
So what if we're not using the product for any kind of food product? So it's not being used for CBD, not being used for the seeds. Are there other markets? I'm sure we heard yesterday about some of the availability for bioplastics, the availability for natural and sustainable textiles. When we get into this kind of atmosphere, the hemp specific regulations aren't really relevant. So the hemp's been cultivated under a permit, it's been tested, it's been harvested. We know that it's hemp. There's no allegation that it's marijuana. It hasn't been distilled down into anything that's concentrated. We're not talking about the cannabinoids anymore. So we're not really talking about it as a product that is regulated just because of what it is. Now we're getting into the atmosphere of regulation because of what it's going to be made into. So we talked about hempcrete, does it meet certain safety and structural integrity requirements? Not, does it have cannabinoids in it anymore? So these are all some of the issues that go into saying whether it might be viable, whether there might be additional legal risk, whether there might be additional business risk. Then we get into animal feed. So with or without cannabinoids, hemp in animal feed, still a little touchy. There's definitely been some studies with certain industries that want to include it in things like chicken feed or things like cattle feed. And so with the cannabinoids, with CBD as being a CBD added product, we already talked about how not legally legitimate. Hemp seed, those grass petitions, don't expand it to the animal world. So what happens if you've invested in a grower, a small grower, that their entire business is relying upon their crop and it has to be disposed of? Is it always a total loss? You're probably not going to get the same amount of return on your investment. Well, we know you're not going to get the same amount of the return on your investment that you would if that crop would have been viable and able to be sold. However, there are some options for disposal that don't include just complete destruction. So obviously burning is and incineration, that is one of those availabilities. However, there's infield composting into what's called green manure. Some have turned it into animal bedding because it's not being ingested for any kind of cannabinoid content. Again, the problem with these alternate disposal methods is they are also enforcement discretion. So another one of those things that it can be hard to rely on. It may in the future be determined that if your crop tests hot, it just has to be destroyed. There's no alternate pathway for it. On the other hand, it's possible that that risk is mitigated by additional enforcement discretion or additional law that at least the Pennsylvania Hemp Steering Committee and other entities have been pushing for these alternate disposal methods or alternate pathways for hemp that does test hot. So while that's not available at this point, it's certainly a possibility in the future. So what is the investor's role going to be? That's really going to be your biggest question when you're deciding whether or not to invest in the hemp industry and what segment of the industry you're going to invest in. Are you going to be a passive investor, money in, money out, or active boots on the ground decision maker? The more active you are, the more important it is for you to really understand the ins and outs of the business so you can make some of those decisions. Do we have any questions? Any discussion? I think we can go ahead and unmute you. Feel free to raise a hand if you'd like to be unmuted.
While we're letting some of them formulate their questions, I did pull up the warning letters that I had mentioned that the FDA issued. And if you saw me chuckle for a moment, it was because where they're, oh, wow, actually, and as we sat here, that's remarkable. They just updated to provide oh goodness, more than a dozen just from this month. So it looks as if the FDA has been motivated, but a great number of the warning letters have been issued directed to companies that are now advertising that their CBD-based products provide health benefits surrounding the coronavirus, whether it diminishes the symptoms, whether, heaven forbid, there's some allegation that it provides immunity to it. But there's a kind of an interesting topical intersection of where a company, let's trust one that none of you would ever consider investing in, has purchased this biomass, has produced it, has turned it into some sort of cannabinoid-based product, and then gone so far as to advertise that it will cure that which is the most timely ailment right now. The FDA is watching. You will get slapped with an enforcement letter, but I would imagine if you Google these companies, you will see their names still active, still selling, and unfortunately probably still out there soliciting investments from individuals like some of you.
It's important to note that the FDA does have significant more power than just warning letters. They can issue a mandatory recall. They can also hold you in essentially in violation of the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act. There is significant penalties that can be associated with that as well. There has been cases in the past, and not in the hemp world, but in the food world, where high-level executives with decision-making power have known about a violation of the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act and actually caused harm because of those violations and allowing them to go on. It's known in the legal world as the Park Doctrine. And some of those higher-level executives have spent significant time in jail. So there are criminal penalties associated with violations of the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act as they become incredibly egregious and are not addressed.
Yeah, you definitely, if you receive one of these letters, you don't want to crumple it up and throw it in the trash can. You obviously need to cure whatever violation they've identified. So if it be an advertising, if it be a business practice, you absolutely need to address it. Another area where companies are going to be, I think, facing an increased area of scrutiny is in the consumer-based lawsuits and advertising areas. You've seen a lot of class action cases start to be filed in the western part of the country against your larger hemp producers or larger CBD cannabinoid companies for any number of reasons. You've seen cases brought alleging that the benefits that these products were alleged to have had were fraudulently advertised. And then you have a battle of experts as to whether or not, what you can prove and what you cannot from a health benefit standpoint. You also have a case in which that I'm intimately familiar with, where someone has purchased one of these products as being advertised as having a certain chemical profile. And when that product is received, it turns out to have a different chemical profile. And as a result, the person who purchased that product suffers incredible damages, loses their job. There's like I said, increasing cases under those umbrellas where investors would need to be mindful of and include in your due diligence to make sure that you don't wind up on the wrong end of a caption. Oh, thank you, Emma. I see you posted the FDA link for everyone to see there. As you can tell, a lot of those are dated just yesterday. So something must have happened in the FDA to get them to clear some of those out.
Well, we did leave quite a bit of time for questions. Oh, I see another one. For hot intermediate extracts. Bill, do you want to tackle the hot intermediate extracts?
Sure. So herein lies a bit of a good example, I think, where we're all trying to figure this out at the same time. And as of now, the regulatory structure is still being worked out. And my understanding is I'm looking at some of the names on the call here, and I'm almost inclined to ask their input on this particular one. But my understanding in discussions with the regulating agency is after the plant is put into the machine and is processed, the testing of that product, there's not a regulatory structure in place right now to test it, right? We know that under Pennsylvania's hemp law, when it has to be tested relative to harvest, we know you have to keep those products. We know the processors have to do their own testing if it's coming in from another source, and you have to keep all those test results and be able to produce them so that after that product is produced, if there are questions, you can say, no, here's the testing, the chemical profile of what went in the machine, and that should be your protection. What I'm not aware of, and if someone has information to the contrary, please feel free to chime in, is the creation yet of a regulatory agency or framework that comes in and after that product has been tested to say, all right, we need to test it again to make sure that you didn't extract so many of one particular cannabinoid and leave in another, that now your finished product is, as indicated in the question, hot. Now, your problem is if it is above 0.3% THC, you have marijuana on your hands, and you are in violation of the Controlled Substances Act because it's no longer hemp. It's the chemical profile of it means that it's something different. But unlike the testing framework that is in place and the regulatory rules and requirements that the Pennsylvania Department of Agriculture and the United States Department of Agriculture is working on to test the product kind of before it goes into the machine, we're still working on how we test what comes out of that machine. And the focus is beyond just simply cannabinoids. You know, we want to know more about what's coming out of that machine simply than how much THC is in it. As all of you know, hemp has the ability to absorb all sorts of good and bad things that are in the soil. And you would like, as this product becomes more and more available and used in kind of everyday life, you want to make sure that the same level of protections that are available for other consumer products are also available here, so that when the person purchases their hemp oil from Wegmans, they know that not only does it not have an excess amount of THC in it, but it also doesn't have any other pollutants or toxins in it. So I realize that's not always, or that wasn't the concrete answer that one might have wanted, but such is the nature of this industry. There's still a lot of uncertainty and more questions than answers often.
And similarly, such is the nature of this industry, that there has been call for legislation or regulation, whether it be by the DEA or by the state prior to the DEA getting involved, of some kind of regulatory framework for these intermediary products. However, that just hasn't come to fruition yet. So we might be in a little bit of a be careful what you wish for atmosphere, but it has seemed to have been the nature of the industry to say, give us regulation so we can follow your rules, rather than leave us alone so we can do whatever we want. The better players in the industry have shown a desire to want to comply with regulations rather than allow this kind of power vacuum or quality vacuum, I would say, to take over. Whereas the only players that are really involved in the industry and really selling products are those that don't really care about doing things right. So, you know, the players who are intending to have a robust and long-term business that, you know, are not under the FDA's scrutiny all the time, are kind of asking for more regulation, asking for someone to jump in and fix these problems or answer these questions. We did see a comment from Mark that said, and sorry to have used your name in my example earlier, Mark, that, you know, there are huge issues of varying test results between labs, that there are no standard protocols in place, and you're 100% correct. But even the sampling protocols for the product itself are they really the best sampling protocols? Is testing just the bud the best way to go about it? A lot of growers would say, no, it absolutely is not the best way to grow about it. Again, one of those things that can be changing, one of those things that the industry is asking the powers that be to change, because obviously if you're just testing the bud, you're just testing the concentrated cannabinoids rather than testing the whole plant. And, you know, the language of the regulators, the language of the regulation allows to test the whole plant, and really probably should be done like that. So a lot of these guidances, for example, the sampling protocol is a guidance, all of this can be changed, and it's important to follow that. And Erica makes the comment that New York does have a good model for protecting processors with hot and mid-processed products. And we are seeing certain states, other states around us, certain states that have had a longer history of a either pilot program or commercial hemp growing, or even some states that have a little bit more experience on the marijuana side, having a little bit more of a robust framework for regulation.
And for those interested, the public comment period on New York's new CBD regulations looks like it's been extended until the middle of January. So feel free to pull those up, take a look, and share your insight as stakeholders on those issues. Well, seeing no other questions, EmmaRose, I don't know where we stand with time, but I don't know if anyone wants to sit here and just stare at our faces.
Could it be that DEA, FDA is using the definition of hot intermediate as marijuana to force processors to register at the federal level and try to gain control of the CBD situation? That's an interesting question, and an interesting assessment. It is possible. Again, your processors and your intermediates are not necessarily your consumer product sales. So FDA has been targeting the sales of consumer products, not necessarily the production at this point. That doesn't mean that's where it will stay. Assuming that CBD ever is federally legal to be in food products, the FDA will have control of that at the food processing side. So any company, now this is going into a little bit of the food space, getting a little bit away from the hemp, but any company that is actually manufacturing a food product with CBD in it will need to meet those food safety requirements. And likely, if CBD is allowed to be in food, there are going to be some specific regulations about how much can be in food, kind of dosage, kind of like your nutrition facts. There's likely to be similar requirements for the inclusion of that. So that's probably a way that FDA would exercise a little bit more authority over the CBD situation and try to control it. FDA already does have significant rules on labeling of food products, and I don't expect that to be any different if CBD would come onto the scene.
And as Erica just pointed out in the chat, the panel at 1 o'clock this afternoon will include a representative from the DEA. So any remaining questions that you think would be better suited to them, you'll have that opportunity. It's a nice benefit.
All right, well, I think that we're going to go ahead and wrap up just a little bit early. And we hope to see you all in the next panels. And I think we'll both be available for additional questions. And reach out to us if you have any questions or any comments or would like to continue the discussion anyway. Well, we wish you all the best of luck. Thanks for your participation in the panel. Before we leave, I'd like to take a quick moment to recognize our top level sponsors and partners for this year's Pennsylvania Hemp Summit. Lancaster Farming, King's Agri-Seeds, PA Agricultural Business Development Center, and Air Products. In the session surveys, please make sure you fill out the survey for this session. Networking is a key feature of the summit, so please network virtually by using the chat, connecting with your business profile, and visiting the forum. All right. Have a great rest of your day, everyone. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.